Hello.
Hi.
Right, so we should be live now.
Still saying private chat at this end.
Live. Well, it says live here, so look,
Oh yeah,
natural discussion is live now.
got it.
Yep. So we've
Yep, we're
got. Yep, we are live. Oh, sugar. I had the wire there, so I didn't know what my phone did. So how are we?
good. Yeah. Thanks for setting up the discussion page and making this happen because I don't have the time for that side of things. So it's really great that people have got a place to talk about the case now.
Yep. No, definitely. Well, basically, I'm going to give you the floor. I'm going to basically just how did you become involved with the Luke Mitchell case? Just basically how it erupted, basically with yourself, and then we'll go into a bit more deeper questioning.
Yeah. Well, I mean, essentially, I'm local to where Jodie was murdered. My business was just down the road. My eldest daughter went to the school that Jodie was found behind. So, as you can imagine, a lot of little villages interlinked around here. Um, a lot of fear, a lot of panic, a lot of disbelief that something like that could happen here. Um, but for me, the thing that concerned me pretty much from the off was how quickly they decided it was this 14-year-old boy. And I'm thinking either they've caught him red-handed or there's something a bit off here. How do they know it's him straight away? Then there was all the local gossip and hysteria, and that actually made me more concerned that they were going after this kid
Yep.
apparently on the basis of local gossip. So I spoke to a few friends of mine and we talked about they had similar concerns, and word got to Luke's mum about the stand that or the approach that I was taking, and she put a note through the door of the place that I worked asking if I'd be willing to talk to them, because by that stage, and we're only talking a matter of weeks after the murder, pretty much this whole area was convinced that Luke was the killer. So I went and I met Corinne, and we had a coffee, and she started telling me what their experiences had been to date. So that was me pretty much involved, if you like, from that point in, just watching it, how it developed. Disbelief is it's how some of it happened. Um, when they took Luke in on the 14th of August for the Section 14 interview, and the media are camped up outside. I'm like, this is a 15-year-old kid. What on earth? And wait, how did the media know they were going to come this particular day and cart him off to the cop shop? And, filming them taking bags and bags of stuff from the house, all designed to go, this is the guy. They kept referring to the
So,
stuff that was taken for the house as evidence. Evidence of what? Contents of somebody's house?
so how long was it before Luke became a suspect in the case?
Luke, we now know, was a suspect from the minute he was taken from the car park behind the school. So within half an hour of Jodie's body being found, Luke was a suspect. The police denied that until 2014, and it was actually the Criminal Cases Review Commission that said he was being treated as a suspect from that point. The police tried to say he wasn't a suspect until the 3rd of July, when they got a search warrant to search his house on the 4th of July. But the fact
Okay.
is, the evidence is he was a suspect from within half an hour of Jodie's body being found. I would argue earlier, but that was the commission's finding.
Right. And how was Jodie's body discovered? Like, where was it discovered? How was it discovered?
She had the plan was that she would come down Ronsdyke path, which is just a little country path between East Houses, where Jodie lived, and New Battle, where Luke lived, and she didn't turn up. So when Luke got the message saying, but it was actually Jodie's mum saying, Jodie, get your backside home, you're late. And Luke told her mum to say, I haven't seen her. She didn't turn up earlier. So that was when the panic set in. And eventually it was within 10 minutes or so, it was decided that Luke would come up the path that Jodie would have used. And if he didn't find her, go to the mums, and the grown-ups would decide to do next. When he got 2/3 of the way up the path, there were people waiting at the top of the path. And somebody called out, is that you, Luke? And it was Jodie's gran, her sister, and her sister's boyfriend. They suggested a double check to go back down the path Luke had just come up. There was never any real reason given why they wanted to do that, just that they should double check. So on the way back down, Luke, his dog was training to be a tracker, and he said he put the dog into tracker mode. And she alerted just past a V-break in the wall. So Luke doubled back, climbed over the wall, saw what he first thought was a tailor's mannequin, and then swung his torch round and shouted, I think there's something here. So the sister and her boyfriend, who'd carried on down the path, ran back to the V. The sister's boyfriend went over and saw Jodie, and then the gran insisted on being helped over, and she went right up. She actually touched the body at that point and then came back over the wall, where they stood and waited for the police to arrive.
How long did it take from the body being discovered to the police arriving?
So let me think, 20 minutes.
20 minutes.
Mm-hmm. The police got lost, so they went to the wrong path, and they didn't know, or they didn't appear to know where the search party were. They didn't appear to know that there was a search party. They thought it was only Luke. And between them going to the wrong place and radioing in, and Luke and sister's boyfriend dialing 999 at different times, the police decided that Luke was galloping about behind the school, when in actual fact, the four searchers, had not moved from the viewpoint the whole time.
And from when the police arrived, there was a 30-minute window for Luke becoming a suspect.
What happened, the police arrived and took the family members back up to the back of the school. Luke was asked to go back over the wall with the other officer to show him where the body was. Now, Luke was the youngest person there. He was 14.
Yep.
And the sister's boyfriend was 17, I think. So nearer to an adult than Luke. But the rest were taken away, and Luke was asked to go over the wall. He refused to go over. He's gone back over there, which they later used to make it sound like he was belligerent rather than terrified. So anyway, the policeman goes over, finds Jodie's body, radios to his partner. Yeah, it's a body. And then he takes Luke back up to the same place as the other three, and they're sitting having a cigarette, and then this policeman comes over and tells Luke to get in the back of a police vehicle with the dog. Just Luke, nobody else. So I would suggest, actually, at that point, Luke was a suspect. There's then about 20, 25 minutes-ish to and froing, and Jodie's aunts by that time had arrived in a vehicle and parked up, and all of Jodie's family were arriving at different times, gathering around this vehicle, some of them getting to sit in the vehicle, and then they drove Luke off to the police station in front of this whole extended family of Jodie's. And they're still in the car park. They didn't even start taking their statements till nearly 5 o'clock in the morning.
So what made Luke become the suspect then? What was the suspicion around Luke?
I believe it was a number of pieces of wrong information that the police had in those first minutes. So the only number the police had was Luke's. They didn't appear to know that the others were out searching. They certainly didn't have numbers for the other three, who'd come in the opposite direction. So Luke had come this way and they'd come that way, and they'd met at the top of the path. They appeared to be of the opinion that Luke and Luke alone had found the body, but they believed, or one of them believed, that Luke had left with Jodie from her own house at tea time, and now he was saying he hadn't seen her. Secondly, they believed that he was coming up the path on his bike, because Jodie's mum told them he was coming up the path on his bike. She said a month later, she didn't know why she'd said that, because he definitely said he was coming with his dog. But if you think about it, here's a lad belting up the path in the dark on his bike, who's seen his girlfriend at 5:30, but is now saying he hasn't seen her at all. And then he stops in the middle of this path in pitch darkness for no apparent reason, climbs over a wall and finds the body. I'd be suspicious of that if any of it were true. But of course, none of it was true.
There's a main question kicking about, right? And I don't know if you've seen the question, but the question is, what was Luke wearing that night? There's a reason to the question of this.
Okay, he was wearing snowboarding boots, distinctive snowboarding boots, really baggy jeans, like baggy jeans, a t-shirt and a green bomber jacket with an orange lining.
Right, so he was wearing that night?
Yep.
So the bomber jacket is getting told about being burned by his mother?
No, that wasn't a bomber jacket. That was a parka jacket.
Was that the parka jacket?
Very confusing. They took Luke's clothes that night. They took the snowboarding boots, they took the baggy jeans, his t-shirt, and the green bomber jacket with the orange lining. On the 4th of July, they raided Luke's home and just took away like masses and masses and masses of stuff. And a few days later, Corinne commented that Luke was wearing the same clothes and they needed to get in the washing machine, that he should go and get changed. And he had nothing to change into because they'd taken every single item of his clothing.
Right, see, I'm getting confused, right? Because I thought it was a bomber jacket he was seen in at the path. It was a parka jacket.
Parka jacket. So
right.
Corinne
took Luke ever own a parka jacket then? Did Luke ever own a parka jacket?
Not until after the murder. Corinne took him shopping to buy new clothes, and the parka jacket was bought in that shopping trip. The receipt was handed to the police. They know the parka jacket was bought after the murder. But what they later claimed, insanity, they later claimed that he was wearing a parka jacket when he murdered Jodie. And he took that home and his mum burned it in the log burner and he got changed into the bomber jacket. And then the following week she took him out and bought him a replacement parka for the one that she burned. So 2 questions. First one is, why would she do that? If she knew her son had killed his girlfriend wearing a parka jacket, why on earth would she put him back in a parka jacket? If anybody had seen him, they'd recognise him in a parka jacket. So that's question number 1. Question number 2 is how on earth, given the amount of time that everything's supposed to have happened in, how on earth do we add several changes of clothes into that time and still claim it's possible?
Personally, I can't answer that because I don't know nothing about it. But I've read most of your book, and for those who don't know, I believe it's Innocence Portrayed.
It is, yeah. Have I got a copy of it? I have. Don't usually do this, but I actually have a copy of it sitting here. So that's the book for anybody that wants to know the details.
And before this live, we had a wee bit of a conversation. and it was more towards the DNA side of things.
Mm-hmm.
I believe you've got a marker.
This was about the condom.
Yes.
So two slightly separate things. So the DNA question is, how did a 14-year-old kid clean every trace of his own DNA from the scene, but leave other people's there?
I believe it was 5 other profiles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also remove every trace of Jodie's DNA from him. Now, there has been an argument that there was DNA from Jodie found on Luke. There's an element of truth in that. But this was DNA that was found on a pair of trousers that were in a holdall from a visit to Luke's dad's the previous weekend. There was no claim that they were in any way connected to the murder, that he wore them that night at all, or even that there was any way to figure out how long that trace from DNA, that trace of Jodie's DNA had been on those other trousers, because they were in a holdall that had come back for his dad's. So
2 seconds, sorry, the dog's licking my leg. Sorry, pal. She was sitting licking my trouser leg there, and I was like, "What's wrong with you?" Sorry. But no.
There's no DNA from Luke at the murder scene, on the body, on the clothing. No DNA from Jodie on any item of Luke's, in his mother's house, in his father's house, in her car, nothing.
Right. I've recently heard from a third party.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to name names, obviously, but I've heard from a third party that Jodie and Luke were intimate with each other. Was there any evidence of
that? Luke's word and Jodie's family's word. So both admitted that they had a sexual relationship. If you mean, was there evidence from physical contact found on Jodie's body, physical contact between Jodie and Luke found on Jodie's body? Absolutely not. There was nothing. So
nothing.
Anybody that tries to claim that there was DNA on Jodie's body that was accounted for because they were intimate is lying. And I can't put it any more plain than that. Anybody that would make that claim as truthful is lying, because that evidence is not there.
Right. So there was a 20-yard. Oh, I think the dog went out. Right, there you go. Right, go then, or don't go. There was a 20-meter radius of the condom being found. And on the James English podcast, I believe he turned around and said that the person who was the owner of the condom would have physically had to have stepped over Jodie's body on the way there and on the way back.
I think I've always said would virtually have had to step over, because until very recently we had his own statements. Now this is important because it's come back to me over and over and over again. How can you say how close he was? We've got his statements where he says.
And you've seen them?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
There's also the question, if he wasn't that far down behind the wall in the woodland strip, how did his condom get there? Just asking, did he throw it with overhanging branches and everything else to get it that close to the reasonable conclusion is that he was at least 20 meters from the body. Now, initially, when the police found the condom, they said it was found 20 meters from Jodie's body. They didn't say in what direction. They just said 20 meters, right? Later, it was changed to this 20-meter radius. And I've always wondered why. Could never figure out why they did that. Aside from they wanted the DNA in that condom to come back and identify Luke, and it didn't. It identified this other guy. So
Yep.
the 20-meter radius, I think, was just to make it seem more distant. But I had a conversation with somebody last week that got me thinking about this again. And I did something I've never done before. I don't know how well you'll be able to see this, but I made a representation of a 20-yard radius. Okay, so I can't do this. That's that's where Jodie's body was found. This is
the red mark. So
yeah.
So the black mark is a path. The black line's a path.
That's a path.
To the oh wait a second. I don't know what I'm doing here. Wait a second. Oh shit! Go away. Right.
This
to
dotted
the right hand side of me, there's a red cross or a red mark.
Yeah, this is where Jodie's body was found. Okay.
Yep.
This is where the body was found. That's the path. This here is the V point down here. Okay. And then this dotted line, that's the barbed wire fence at the other side of the woodland strip. Now, they said the condom was found within a 20-meter radius of the body, within the woodland strip. So straight away, we've got a problem. Look, this is all field on the other side of the barbed wire fence. This is all field on the other side of the wall. So the condom wasn't in either of these two areas. So the only bit left is that plain bit, clear bit in the middle. Okay?
Well, I've actually been there and I've been over the V-break in the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And you go down, there's a little, recently there's been a little fire been put up with logs and stuff in it, but when you look over, there's a field. So it is put off with the bad wire.
Yeah.
So when you're going, there's a 20-meter radius. I'm thinking to myself, when I was there, I wouldn't have said that was 20 metres, because 20 metres is only going to take you to the bad wire, roughly.
I think from the wall to the barbed wire is just about 10 metres.
See, I had photos of it. Yeah, no, you're about right. You're about right. About 10 metres. So 20 metres would take you into the field.
Yeah. Yeah, 20 metres.
So 20 metres would take you into the field. Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah.
And 20 metres the other way is back over the wall in the other field. So if it's in the woodland strip.
Yeah, because when you go over the V-break, if you look down, the minute you're over the wall, if you look down, there's trees. There's a tree line. It was a very slim path. It's about that wide.
Yeah, along the inside of the wall. Yeah.
Yeah, but along the inside of the wall. Now, it's possible to walk down it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not possible, I wouldn't say, for 20 metres. If you walk down 20 metres, you're getting hit by bush.
Mm.
You go straight in front of you, there's a big, large path that they could take you around it, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's various ways down through there. But the fact remains, this condom was either 20 metres this way, which is towards Newbattle, or it was 20 metres this way, where is it, towards East Houses. The only two directions it could possibly be. It's actually that simple. It can't be here, and it can't be here. So it was either 20 metres towards Newbattle, or 20 metres towards East Houses. Now, the 20 metres, you can see here, finishes just before the V.
Yeah.
Coming down for the East Houses end. So if it was this end, the claim that he saw nothing, possibly he saw nothing in broad daylight. If he was trying to follow this down the wall path, which I don't think he ever claimed that was where he went down through the woods. So if he went in any other direction, most chances are he would have seen the body anyway. But if it was in the woodland strip after the V point, it has to have been past the body. It's actually that simple. It has to have been past the body. So still something we're looking into. I still don't know why we were never given any schematic showing us where the various items were in relation to the body. Never seen that.
There was DNA in a T-shirt as well, though, is that right?
Yes, that was the T-shirt Jodie was wearing. So they claimed that it was a T-shirt that she borrowed from her sister, and her sister's boyfriend's DNA turned up on it. The explanation was that the DNA had originally been transferred in a washing machine and then had been further transferred by rainwater. That was the explanation for.
Is that possible?
There are suggestions that sperm heads would survive a wash in a washing machine, but seminal fluid wouldn't. It'd be completely destroyed. So if there were just sperm heads, then washing machine transfer may account for them. Transfer by rainwater is a whole other ballgame. I've spoken to forensics experts. General consensus is no way. But the samples that were found on the T-shirt were not just sperm heads. They were semen and sperm heads. And that semen could not have transferred in a washing machine. Not
right, because I've watched numerous murder investigations, and forensic scientists say their worst nightmare is water.
Yeah.
Because it washes away all evidence, it washes away all DNA and all that. So, I mean, you're saying that it's been in a washing machine. I'm going, I thought water was a forensic's worst nightmare.
Well, it's been put to me many, many times. Jodie's body was left out in the rain all night. They didn't even put a tent over her. I mean, I don't think it gets much more disrespectful than that. And it's been put to me many times in the past, well, you know, that rain could have washed away evidence. It could have washed away evidence put and look at the scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could, but be very, very surprising if it washed away evidence put and look at the scene and left DNA from other people there. Left the many, many short colourless hairs that were found on Jodie's body that to this day have never been identified. So I think the argument that Luke's DNA could have been there but was washed away with rainwater, it doesn't really stand with all these other DNA profiles still there.
And what really, really gets to me, like it's been getting to me for quite a while, is why you're fighting for somebody's innocence who some folk believe is a monster. Why would you be fighting for an innocence that if somebody believes they're a monster, then why would you want them back on the streets where your daughters and you live? You know what I mean?
Well, that's the thing, you see. And it's actually quite simple. If Luke Mitchell didn't do what was done to Jodie, the person who did is still out there. And at the time when I first got involved, my girls lived right here. They lived their life right here. So if the real perpetrator is still out there, my girls are still at risk, as are everybody else's.
Yeah.
So why did I fight? I wanted to be sure. And the more I found out and the more I saw, especially once I got the case files, the more I thought, oh dear God, all that money, all that fanfare, all that media hysteria, and there's still a murderer walking about among us. And basically, we sacrificed a 14-year-old kid to close a case that the police screwed up from the off. Anybody feel safe now?
Before the James English interview, like I was only 9 years old at the time, of Jodie's murder.
Mhm.
So obviously I didn't have a lot of look into it. I don't remember any of it. It wasn't until recently, maybe about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that somebody pulled a name up, and I was like, and I was like, oh my god. And like we done a lot of online stuff, and people were passing us cases, and the first thing I seen when I seen it was monster. That's what I thought to start with. And then I watched the interview with you and James, because I follow James, and it was the Paul Ferris kind of things that I started watching. Then I watched something with you, and I was like, wait a minute. So that's what pulled me into this. I'm like,
Mhm.
what was he convicted on? What was the conviction? What was the evidence that he was convicted on?
So the say so of the three other searchers that the dog didn't alert that Luke just went over the wall and didn't react at all. He wasn't upset. He wasn't shocked. So he led them straight to the murder, and he must have known where the body was in order to be able to do that. So that was plank one. The problem with that is that for the first month of the investigation, the other three searchers were telling exactly the same story as Luke. The dog reacted just past the V-brake. Luke doubled back, handed the dog's lead to the granny, and went over the wall. They were also saying things like Luke, Jodie's sister said, Luke looked like he was in shock. His eyes were wider than normal. I could tell by the concern in his voice that it was something bad. So the whole idea that Luke didn't react and that the dog didn't react for the first month, their own statements contradict that. But by the time they came to court, they didn't remember the dog reacting. Luke just went over the wall for no apparent reason.
How many times were the statements changed?
Oh, I'd have to go back and because there were dozens of statements from all of them. You know,
Yeah.
like many statements. Up to the end of July, they were telling the same story. The dog reacted, and then it was things like I don't remember if the dog pulled over to the wall, or if Luke pulled the dog over to the wall. So it was little changes like that over time. And you got to remember, you know, there was 19 months. Was it 19 months? Yeah, 19 months between the murder and the start of the trial. So that's a long time for little details to be being tinkered until you get the trial, and the dog did nothing. But the sister's boyfriend's description of the dog, he says it was a big dog, it's an Alsatian. When it was standing up against the wall, with its paws up against the wall, its head was higher than the bottom of the V. How do you have that detailed a recollection for something that didn't happen? Because he later claimed it didn't happen. How could he give that description of something that didn't happen?
Well, I've actually got a German Shepherd, Alsatian, and if I was walking her and the V breaking that wall, if I had to think about her jumping up that wall, then I could happily say that she was going to be bigger than the V breaking the wall. So is he thinking that she's bigger than the wall, or did he see that?
Well,
I mean, one or two paws. I mean, she's about, when she goes up on her hind legs, I'm just 6, I'm about 6 foot, or 5'11", 6 foot. And when she goes up there, her face is about maybe my nose.
mm-hmm. But why
So,
would he think he'd seen it if he hadn't?
But that way he told the police he's seen the dog.
He saw the dog. They all did. They all did. Yeah.
They all did. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I must see them.
So in the first month they all did, and then by the time it got to trial, they were all saying that the dog did nothing. Luke just went through the wall, and that was it. So we've got this real problem with this change of accounts of what happened. The second plank of the prosecution case was that Luke didn't have an alibi. He did have an alibi. His mother and his brother were his alibi, but they chose not to believe them. Now, that's a different thing from saying he didn't have an alibi. The police chose not to believe them. But interestingly, the police chose to believe other people whose only alibi was one other person. So again, you've got to ask yourself, why was it not good enough for Luke? It was good enough for other people.
Right. So, leaves the question. I believe that Luke was in the house and the brother was. Oh, sugar, fallen. So I believe that Luke was in the house and his brother and his mum were arriving home late, and Luke had a dinner on from coming home. Is that right?
His mum was expected to arrive home and did arrive home at her usual time. His brother would phone ahead if he, if he was maybe going to be late or stopping off somewhere or whatever, and just say, like, leave mine to the side. I'll microwave it later on. So somebody was in Luke's house that afternoon making calls from the landline and receiving calls on the landline. We know this because the phone logs show it. So he phoned his mum's work at about 4:25 to ask what she wanted for the dinner. His brother phoned to say he'd be late or later in. So because he was actually he forgot about it. He was reminded about it later. His brother was stopping off at a friend's to check out his car because the friend was having problems with his car. So these phone calls were going back and forward. His brother was at his work. His mum was at her work. Who was making the calls? Who was answering them in the house? Could only have been Luke. So we know he was in the house at that point. And this is the whole bit about a suggestion was made that Luke didn't go home from school that day, that he went up and hid in the woodland strip to lay in wait for Jodie. They have a problem with that because their final story was that Jodie was grounded right up till 4:30. She didn't know she was going to get out that night till 4:30. Why would Luke go and wait in the woodland strip for somebody that wasn't allowed out? Again, these are the anomalies in the official story where they had to keep changing their story to make it fit. And they left all these bits, these loose ends that make no sense, just make no sense at all.
See, that's what kind of threw me with the anomaly with Luke being in the house at the time, the phone calls, the DNA. That was everything that threw me was how can this happen? Do you know what I mean?
Well, if you go 6 weeks from the murder, so Luke had just turned 15, and he was taken in for what was called a Section 14 interview at the time, and that's when they were legal back then. They're no longer legal, but that's where they can take people in, including children, for 6 hours with no legal representation, no advice, lock them in a room and interrogate them for 6 hours. And people go, well, if you've done nothing wrong, you've got nothing to hide. What's the problem? Well, the problem here is in that interview, those police officers lost it. Now that's not my opinion. The appeal court judges said their behaviour was outrageous and to be deplored. The way they treated a 15-year-old kid. They pushed and pushed and pushed to try and get him to lose his temper, or they wanted him to confess, and he wasn't going to confess because he didn't do it. But what they did was, when they goaded him until he snapped back, they picked out those bits to play to the jury to make him look aggressive, belligerent, no respect for authority. They didn't play the hours of Luke trying to answer their questions because they wouldn't accept any of his answers. Didn't matter what he said, they would not accept it. So this 6 hours of basically mental torture were to produce evidence that could be used against him that was actually evidence of nothing at all. There's one of the ways it can be done.
What was said in that interview, do you know? Are you out to disclose that? Or?
From the off, it was absolutely clear they lied all the way through it for a start. The police lied all the way through it. They said that all these witnesses that had seen Luke in, and it wasn't, we hadn't got to the parka jacket by then. This is really important. So they take him for 6 hours, they interrogate him for 6 hours. They tell him they've got dozens of witnesses that have described him to a T. And he's wearing a German army shirt. Where did those witnesses go for that clothing to have changed to a parka jacket a year later? Where are all the witnesses to the army shirt? They've gone. So that was it. They told Luke they had all these witnesses. They told Luke they had DNA on Jodie's underwear that tied him to the murder. And we know they absolutely did not. They were just throwing anything at him to try and make him confess. And like I said, the appeal judges themselves said their behaviour was outrageous and to be deplored.
Was there not something about, was it him and his legal rep had to go into another room and have a conversation? Or was that him and the police had to go into the room and have another conversation with Luke before the legal rep appeared?
No, he didn't have a legal rep. Didn't have a legal rep at all in any of his interviews.
I heard there was something about Luke and a lawyer had to go into another room while the police waited in the interview room.
Never happened.
No?
He was never interviewed with a solicitor. Not the night he was taken straight from the murder scene. And there's another thing. They took this kid straight to the police station after seeing what he's seen. And believe me, I've seen what was done to Jodie. He was 14 and he saw it for real. Straight to the police station, stripped him, got samples from him and everything else. Not once was he offered psychological help. Not once. He got tranquilizers from the doctor after he was released from the police station. That is the only help Luke Mitchell has ever had to deal with what he saw that night. That's how we've treated a kid.
See, I've always said from day one, from watching that interview with yourself and James, that he's innocent. And this is when I became a bit more involved with yourself to get a bit more understanding regarding Luke. And then obviously there was a lot of controversy from Midlothian. Well, some people in Midlothian saying, no, this didn't happen, because I believe Luke's mum lost a caravan park, or had caravans in a caravan park, and they were all setting fire. And
there was all sorts. There was all sorts. She had a brick put through the back window of her car while she was driving it. There was graffiti on the walls. They vandalised her business. Somebody shot an air pellet through one of the windows in the house. It was unbelievable. And I think that the media has to take some responsibility for the amount of hatred that they stirred up in this area before that boy had stood in a court and a single piece of evidence had been put before him. He was already guilty in the eyes of the public.
Yeah. How
do you come back from that? How do you prove you're not weird? Which is the big thing. Oh, he was weird. Show me. Show
Was
me
it
the
not
stuff
something to do with the Black Medal? I always get this
like
wrong.
Dahlia.
Black Dahlia
Well, the
murder.
interesting thing
Was a
about
copycat murder.
the interesting thing about the Black Dahlia murder is it was claimed that Luke had, and this is the judge, carried those images. So these are the watercolors that Marilyn Manson had on his website. That Luke had carried these images in his mind, and that's what he was using as his template to do what he did to Jodie. Pardon me, according to the judge. Teeny difficulty with that is there is not a single scrap of evidence anywhere ever that Luke Mitchell knew anything about the Black Dahlia murders, that he'd ever seen the Marilyn Manson paintings of the Black Dahlia murder, that he'd accessed anything whatsoever about it online. So why is a judge making comments about something for which there was not a single scrap of evidence ever?
I can
Again,
answer that.
used to make him look weird when there was no truth in it.
I've just been asked if we can ask questions from the comments. Can you see the comments?
I can, maybe I can. Oh, I didn't have the comments. So I can see them now. Yeah. What's the question?
We've been asked if we can answer some questions from the comments. I've not seen any questions right enough, but
I tend not to look at these because they throw me.
I can't see any. There was only one question. I think it was from Sharon. Was a section 14 with a question mark?
Yeah, I've touched on the section 14 where they took him in and they interrogated him for all that time, and basically just tried to make him confess. And they used everything they had. They used everything they had to try and get him to confess, including just lying outright to him.
Yeah.
So, I see here somebody saying crime scene tampered with, loads of errors from the beginning. Well, yeah. I mean, one of the things that we found out afterwards is that somebody gathered up Jodie's clothing before the forensics officers got there. Somebody, they ordered overhanging trees to be cut down so the videographer could get a better look.
Yeah, so yeah, I remember that as well.
Yeah, Jodie's body was rolled onto a plastic sheet before the forensics officers got there. I mean, what was left for the forensic officers to actually examine? What was left of the original scene? And that's a real problem there. They talked about the DNA transfer. It could have been that the police gathered up these items of clothing and had them all together, and that's what caused the DNA transfer. Which, if that were the case, you'd not maybe be looking at other people and going, how did his DNA get from there to there to there to there? Because that might explain it. We don't know because they didn't keep enough records of who was doing what and where and when, and most importantly, why.
Right, there was a question. Sorry, there you go. There was a question just put in there saying, what about the random knife that was found not long ago near the scene? But we're talking about a murder for 2003, so how long is not long ago?
Right. So there was a knife found, that is absolutely true, and it had the name Luke engraved on the handle, that is also absolutely true, and it was found near a local high school. True also, except that the knife we're talking about was found beside the new Dalkeith High School St David's campus, which is a mile and a half at least from where Jodie was found. And it was a brand new school campus. In fact, it was just opening at the time Jodie was murdered. So you're not telling me in a brand new campus that was just being finished off, a big flagship new school. They missed a murder weapon. The weapon was also, the knife was also tested, and there was nothing to connect it to the murder. So either some poor lad called Luke dropped his knife and created a bit of a stir, or somebody quite deliberately threw that in there for God knows what reason, but left it at the wrong school.
And there was another question saying, okay, so my bigger question is, did they even consider anyone else as a suspect? I
No.
can answer that and just go quite clearly no.
There were no other suspects. And Craig Dobby, the senior investigating officer, admitted that on the stand. So for all these people that say, oh no, so-and-so was a suspect and so-and-so, look, and look alone. The only house or houses searched in this entire massive murder investigation were Luke's mum's house and Luke's dad's house. No other houses.
So begs the question, if you were asked, and I believe the last time with the interview with James was, you said that you would at least have put possibly 3 people there. Yeah, or you'd have had another 3 people as a suspect to rule or not rule them out.
Yeah, I wouldn't have put them there, but certainly I would have wanted them investigated maybe a bit more thoroughly. Let's put it that way. I think if you're a police investigation and you're investigating a murder like this, an absolutely brutal murder like this, then you need to at the very least be a bit open-minded when you're presented with evidence that may, now what's that, I'm trying to word this really carefully, that may be consistent with potential involvement in the crime. So, for example, if you've got somebody whose DNA is there, they might be worth a bit further look until you can rule that DNA out. You don't go galloping off and give them an innocent explanation. You investigate further. People who claimed to have been at the V-brake, so the 2 boys in the moped, claimed to have been at the V-brake at the exact time of the murder, 5:15, and saw and heard nothing. Why was that taken pretty much at face value? If Jodie was being murdered behind that wall at 5:15 and they were on the other side of the wall, how is it possible for them to have seen and heard nothing? And the reason I think the police should have done a bit more groundwork there, potentially to eliminate them entirely, and we wouldn't still be talking about this 17 years later, is that Jodie's mum said she believed they were not telling the truth. They were lying for their own selfish reasons. Well, why wouldn't Jodie's mum want to know what these reasons were? Why wouldn't she want to know what those lies were? So it's things like that if this was done properly, I would not still be here more than 17 years later now saying, what's the answer to this? What's the answer to that? Why wasn't this done? Why wasn't that done? Because we're supposed to convict people in this country beyond reasonable doubt. There's so much doubt surrounding this case, so many things that have never been answered, that all they do is create reasonable doubt. And I for one, don't think that's acceptable when you're about to take somebody's liberty for life. And this is something we touched on earlier. People say, oh, Luke got minimum 20 years, Luke got a minimum sentence of 20 years. Yeah, does anybody know what Luke's maximum sentence is? Without limit of time. 16-year-old kid, without limit of time. That means forever. For the rest of his life. The media didn't pick up on that. They picked up on the minimum 20. But that minimum 20 is what he has to serve before he could even be considered for parole.
But does he not have to admit the crime first?
I was just going to say, if he continues to maintain his innocence, he can't take any of the courses to address his offending behaviour, because as far as he's concerned, he has no offending behaviour to address. And if he doesn't take the courses, it's the taking of these courses that's supposed to prove that his risk level to the public has decreased.
So in the nicest possible way, if he admits it, then for the 17 years that you've been defending him, it's going to make you look like a bit of a cunt.
Entirely.
In the nicest possible way.
Yeah. But, you know, if he turned around tomorrow and said, I did it, and here's where you'll find the evidence that I managed to remove from the scene, and somebody goes and finds it, and that's actually the case, I'd still defend the last 17 years. Because without the proper investigation, nobody knows. Nobody knows.
But
and there's always the risk with this work that there's something you don't know. There's always the risk that there's something hidden away somewhere. In this case, if it had been evidence of Luke's involvement, they would have used it. Absolutely would have used it, because their case was so tenuous in the first place that any proper evidence they would have used. So as far as I'm concerned, as far as it's possible to ascertain, it's not there. It's not there.
Well, like, I'm 100% sure that he is not guilty. I'm 100% sure that he is innocent. And I really want a lot of more folks to be more involved with this case and be a little bit more aware of what's not there, rather than what the media are saying are there.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? And there's like nothing there that we can do. If Luke had to be tried today, I don't think he'd be found guilty.
No. I think they would struggle to bring a case against him today on the basis of evidence.
We've crashed. Are you still there?
I'm still here.
I think we've crashed. I can hear you, yeah, but I think we've crashed.
Okay, well, we'll leave it at that, and we can do another one soon.
Right. Okay. Well, I think I don't know. I can definitely still hear you, but I don't know what's happening here. We've actually crashed. I don't know how long we've been crashed for, but
I can see both of us, but I don't know.
Can you see my hand moving?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you can still see me, that's fine. Then that's
yeah.
I'm not got a problem with that one.
The live count
Just, I'm looking at you. We're just completely paused. But no, I'm just going to message through saying I can hear and see you both, so that's fine. As long as everybody can hear me and see me, that's fine. Because I don't want to be standing there looking like this, so this appears froze my face.
No, I think we're still going.
Yeah, right, okay. Because I believe that somebody said that you only get a limit of time on this. I think it was only like an hour or so. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it might cut us off. We're at 59:21. It might cut us off at an hour.
Right. Okay. I'm not sure either. But to finish off, basically, you've been targeted as well, I believe, through numerous people that stay in the community and things like that. So, like, I think I'm trying to think how you put it. Like, I think the best way that people can look at the case is by buying the book, which is Innocent Trade. And I think you said the last time on the Table English podcast that when you are finished with the story, somebody else can pick up as well after yourself. and they can look at it and see it.
I think anybody that wants to pick it up right now and look at it, and if they think they can do anything to help, anything, do it. We need you. You know, I've been, Corinne and I, on our own for the best part of 16 years. Anybody that can help with anything, please, we need you.
Absolutely. So what I'll do is, once we finish this interview, what I'll do is I'll put on the comments the name of the book and where to get it as well. I believe it's still on Amazon, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yep. So once we're finished, I'll put the link and stuff in the comments so people can go and either purchase it and have a look at it. Can they download it?
No, it's not. It's not in e-format at all. It's a physical book at the minute.
Right. Okay.
It's the only way I was able to do it initially. And the other thing that I would like to just throw in here before we finish is the Truth Seeker project, which I started a few months ago, and it got derailed a bit because of internet problems. I'm ready to start going again. The Truth Seeker project is my attempt to bring information about wrongful convictions into the public domain by getting people to tell their own stories. People who've been wrongly accused, people who've been wrongly convicted. So you'll find
something on YouTube as well, isn't there, about the Truth Seekers?
You'll find the Truth Seeker project on, and it is just called the Truth Seeker project on YouTube. Yep. There is a website. Again, I'm just working on getting that updated because in this work, you'd be amazed how many trolls get into stuff, how many things get crashed apparently accidentally. Oops, don't know how it happened. So we're up against it constantly. But Truth Seeker interviews will be starting again, I think next week. And if you just have a look, it's just people telling stories about how this happened to them. Okay.
Okay. Well, I'll definitely look into that. I believe there's something on Netflix as well called Making a Murderer.
So this is an American case that has a lot of similarities with Luke's case. So Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey clearly fitted up. You know, it's one of these in your face, clear. This case was just built around them in order to ensnare them. So yeah, there are similarities there as well.
Yeah. Well, this is my very, very, very first interview, and I think it actually went really well. I was actually quite surprised myself. I was expecting just to sit here and shut up, and then I had question after question after question come into my head, and I'm like, I better ask about this, I better ask about that. And I know I said I'd give you the floor, but it's like, what about this? What about that? So I think this has actually went rather well. It's been a lot more forward than what I thought it would go. And so before we end, we'll just put that out there. So it's a Truth Seeker project that's on YouTube.
Yeah.
And there's Innocence Betrayed on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
So guys, if you're interested, please head over, give the Truth Seekers project a like, a subscribe, and give it a share. And also, I'll put the link in for where you can go and get the book. I've not read the full book. I have got the book. It's down in my old house, but I've still got it. So I'm going to have a read through that again and just get my head familiarised with this.
It's a lot to get your head round.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So I went through all the interviews from last Sunday till now. So this is where I'm getting all the questions from. I thought it was a bomber jacket. You said bomber and Parker. I got mixed up with two of them. So
that's okay.
So yeah, I think we'll finish up on that, and we'll have it shared to obviously the page, and we'll have it on YouTube as well.
Yeah.
So firstly, let me thank you for coming on and doing the interview, because I know you're quite a hard one to get a hold of. So firstly, thank you for such short notice.
Thank you for doing what you're doing, because you know, getting this to be a wider conversation, is what's been needed this time. So, yeah, thank you.
No, thank you, because if it wasn't for you, I would never have done this. So, thank you for giving me a bit of an eye opener, because I think a page like this is needed for people to have their own opinion. And then, first, I keep getting messages through. Sorry, that's why I'm going forward to the screen over 2 seconds. I think a page like this is needed so people can have their own opinion and put on what they think and how they feel about the case. Do you know what I mean? I don't think it should be a one-sided thing. I think there should be a two-sided. Do you know what I mean? If somebody thinks he's guilty, why do you think he's guilty? If somebody thinks he's innocent, why do you think he's innocent?
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? Personally, my own opinion is he is 100% innocent, but you're going to have those very few people who think he is guilty. Do you know what I mean? So you've got both sides.
Craig, the media did a fantastic job of convincing the majority of people, and it's only now that we're starting to see opinions starting to change. It's only now that we're starting to see people saying, I thought he was guilty and now I'm not so sure. So this is what these sort of discussions do. They get people who are utterly convinced to have another look. And that's, I just keep saying, have a look. Compare it to what you thought you knew, and think again. Do you still believe it? That's all I ask of people.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Okay, well, for a first interview, I think you were great. Well done.
I appreciate it. Right, so I'm now going to have to figure out how to end this live. Right, well, Sandra, again, thanks so much for coming on. I'll get a further update with you later on and let you know how things go and progress and stuff.
Yeah, cool.
All right. Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Right, bye. Bye.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody.